Hello everyone and welcome back to the 3T Path channel. Welcome back to our Uddhava-gita course. Now we're in a very important session of the Uddhava-gita course where we are seeing the teachings of Lord Hamsa, the Swan Avatar, being taught by Krishna to Uddhava. But this Swan Avatar is quite unique. It's a very highbrow avatar. He's talking only to the four Kumaras and Lord Brahma, and it's a very deep philosophical discussion on the nature of the mind and consciousness. Really good stuff. And of course, if you want to watch all the previous classes of this Uddhava-gita course, there are over 60 classes already. This is the 63rd class. All you have to do is become a member of this channel, and the instructions are here in the description of the video. Then you can access all the classes. And also do check out Uddhava-gita.com, where you can see a whole course organized there. Okay, so we're now in the 11th canto, 13th chapter, verse 26. So the topic of the discussion here was the nature of the mind and the object of the senses, how they interact, desire entering into the mind entering into the sense objects, this interaction that keeps the soul stuck, bound to material energy, to Prakriti, and of course then not being freed and going back to its original spiritual transcendental state. So that's the nature of the discussion here. Now Krishna is talking about the importance of understanding your nature as apart from mind and the senses, and identifying your mind with the divine, with transcendence. Verse 26. A person who has thus achieved me by understanding that he is not different from me realizes that the material mind is lodged within the sense objects excuse me, because of constant sense gratification, and that the material objects are existing prominently within the material mind. So what he's saying is, when you understand your transcendental nature, when you identify yourself as being a part of the Supreme, if you want to get more devotional, servant of God, if you want to just understand your divine nature, or just want to keep it simple, you're Brahman, just like Supreme Brahman, you're part of Brahman. If you understand that, then you can see the nature of the mind as a part of the material world, part of your body, your material body, and the mind and the senses, they are intimately and forever connected. Having understood my transcendental nature, he gives up both the material mind and its objects. So the idea is, once you understand your spiritual nature, then you're no longer identifying yourself with matter. You're no longer lost in that forever eternal game of mind and the sense objects influencing the mind through desire, and just stuck in material mentality. Purport. And the Lord again states here that it is most difficult to separate the material mind from its objects, because the material mind by definition considers itself to be the doer and enjoyer of everything. That's the material, that's the psychology of a materially bound soul. You think yourself as the doer, ahankar, the maker, the I maker, the ahankar, the doer, and the enjoyer of everything. So you're always you think that you're doing things because you think you're matter, and you think that you should enjoy everything in matter, and then you forget your true nature. It must be understood that giving up the material mind does not mean giving up all mental activities, but instead means purifying the mind and engaging one's enlightened mentality in the devotional service of the Lord. So actually, the path of yoga doesn't mean giving up the mind, doesn't mean giving up material life things, all the actions of your day-to-day life. It doesn't mean trying to run away from those things, because you can't. It's not even possible. It just means doing those things with a different state of consciousness, understanding your true nature and the nature of matter. But instead means purifying the mind and engaging one's enlightened mentality in the devotional service of the Lord. Since time immemorial, the material mind and senses have been in contact with the sense objects, which are the basis of its... Therefore, how is it possible for the material mind to give up its objects, which are the basis of its existence? And not only does the mind reach out to material objects, but also because of the mind's desires, the material objects cannot remain out of the mind, helplessly entering at every moment. Thus, separation between the mind and sense objects is actually not feasible. Nor does it serve any purpose. If one retains a material mentality, considering oneself to be supreme, one may renounce sense gratification, considering it to be ultimately the cause of unhappiness, but one will not be able to remain on such an artificial platform. Nor will such renunciation serve any real purpose. Without surrender to the lotus feet of the Lord, mere renunciation cannot take one out of this material world. That's a very interesting concept. Renunciation, giving things up, rejecting things of life, of material life. That is a limited path. I mean, how much can you reject? Yeah, I'm not going to have a house. Yeah, but you're still walking around. You know, you still, I'm not going to have a bed, but you're still going to lie on the ground. I'm not going to have a pillow, I'm going to use my arm, you know, you're still going to use your arm. How much can you reject? Oh, I won't eat, I'll only drink, but then you're still drinking, or no, I won't drink either, you know, you're breathing, you know, like what? There's this limits to it, it just doesn't work, you know, like how much can you reject? You know, it's just that rejecting won't work because you're completely within Prakriti, so there's nowhere to run. There's nowhere to go. You have to know how to use, know how to see the world and not just reject it. Just as the sun's rays are part of the sun, the living entities are part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When the living entity is completely absorbed in his identity as the part and parcel of the personality of Godhead, he becomes actually wise and easily gives up the material mind and sense objects. Because he can give up these mind and sense, because now he knows what to do with things. He knows how to engage his body and his mind and everything in his life. You know what to do when you get into the proper state of mind. You know that everything belongs to God. You know that you can practice and live your dharma here and live your purpose here as a loving offering to Krishna. And thus you're here, but your mind is in a state of transcendental love. So you're already living as your true nature, as a transcendental lover, servant of God, even while here. It makes no difference where you are. Immersed in such ecstatic meditation, one should render devotional service to the Lord, and this will automatically drive away the influence of sense gratification. By himself, the living entity does not have the potency to give up his false identification with the material mind and sense objects, but by worshiping the Lord in the mood of being his eternal part and parcel servant, one is infused with the Lord's potency, which easily drives away the darkness of ignorance. Very nice. Okay, now we'll talk about an important topic in yogic philosophy, the fourth stage of consciousness. Starting with this verse. Waking, sleeping, and deep sleep are the three functions of the intelligence and are caused by the modes of material nature. The living entity within the body is ascertained to possess characteristics different from these three states, and thus remains as a witness to them. So they have this language, this is the concept, three states of consciousness, which we are all, doing, even animals, and everybody's doing this one. Waking, which is what we're doing now, unless you've fallen asleep watching this class. So waking, then sleep. By sleep, they mean like dreaming sleep, and then deep sleep is that non-dreaming sleep would be, so they have these, they didn't have light sleep like we do today, like they just had, sleep with dreams or sleep with no dreams. So they only had these two qualifications of sleep. I know today it's a little more complicated, but never mind that. So waking, sleep, deep sleep. Either you're just knocked out, deep sleep, nothing's going on, and not that you're conscious of anything, but you're there somehow, you just kind of blacked out. And then sleep, where you're dreaming, and waking stage. So three stages of consciousness. Everybody's going through those three. But what you have to do is understand that you are the observer of these three. Who is going through these three? Somebody's observing these three states of consciousness. So that stepping back is the beginning of spiritual realization. So you step back. So the living entity within the body is ascertained to possess characteristics different from these three states. And thus, he can remain as a witness to them. Once you understand that, wait, I'm not these states. I am different. I have different characteristics from these three states. So now I can remain as an observer to them, a witness to them. Purport. The spirit soul actually has nothing to do with the material world, having no permanent or natural relationship with it. Real renunciation means to give up the illusory identification with matter. This is a very important point. Very important point. The idea is to give up the illusion of identification, not to give up matter, because again, there's no way you can do that right now. Oh, I'm going to kill myself. That won't work. Nothing's going to work. There's nothing you can do. I'll take your spaceship, you can go somewhere. Nothing's going to work. You can't give up, but you can give up the identification, the illusory identification with matter. So that's what we're doing. We're giving up the illusion of identification with matter. Real renunciation means to give up the illusory identification with matter in its subtle and gross forms. Susuptam, or deep sleep, indicates sleeping without any dreams or conscious activity. These three states are described by Lord Krishna as follows. Satvaj jagaranam vidyad rajasa swapnam adishit prashvapam tamasa jantos tudiyam trishu santatam. One should know that wakefulness is born of the mode of goodness, dreams from the mode of passion, and deep dreamless sleep from the mode of ignorance. The fourth element, pure consciousness, which will be described in the next verse as well, is different from these three and pervades them. This is from the same conversation here with Uddhava, but in chapter 25, verse 20. So it's Canto 11, chapter 25, verse 20. Real freedom means sakshittvena, or to exist as a sakshi, as a witness to the functions of illusion. Such an advantageous position is achieved by developing of Krishna consciousness. Okay, now the fourth stage. Verse 28. The spirit soul is trapped in the bondage of material intelligence, which awards him constant engagement in the illusory modes of nature. But I am the fourth stage of consciousness, beyond wakefulness, dreaming, and deep sleep. Becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. At that time, the living entity will automatically renounce the material sense objects and the material mind. It's a very cool verse, very important. So let's go through it again. So this first, a shocking statement by God. The spirit soul is trapped in the bondage of material intelligence. Trapped in this material mentality, which awards him constant engagement in the gunas, in the illusory modes of nature. So you're constantly trapped in involvement with matter. The soul is trapped in bondage, right? We've been trapped for millions of lifetimes. And so we're all busy with things here. And we're busy with this and that and the other thing, and it's conquering this and building that and making this money and that career and this study and that person, that relationship and that, entertainment. You're just trapped. One thing after another, always. And when you were a dog, you were like, you had your little dog plans and intelligence and cat and, everybody just trapped in their little things. So, spirit soul's trapped. But, Krishna is saying here, the Uddhava Avatar is speaking, I am the fourth stage of consciousness beyond wakefulness, sleeping and deep sleep. So now there's a fourth stage of consciousness hardly anyone achieves. But you can achieve it. Now, with the help of Uddhava-gita, we can achieve it easily. The fourth stage of consciousness, beyond just regular waking, sleeping, and deep sleep. This is the transcendental stage of consciousness. So we can achieve this by connecting our minds, yoga connection, connect your minds to Krishna. So, becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. And this is what happens. This is the path of spiritual enlightenment, where by connecting your mind, by connecting your consciousness to Krishna, to the divine, you can then, you have an alternative. Now you finally have an alternative. Now it's not that it's just material mind and sense objects and your intelligence trapped in the illusory modes of nature. Now you have an option. Now your mind can be connected, yogad to Krishna, to the divine. Now you can be the witness of matter. You can be the observer of the actions. You're no longer the doer, you're the observer of action being held in by the material body, in the material world, by the material mind, with the material sense objects. Now you're the observer, connected with the fourth stage of consciousness. Becoming situated in me, the soul should give up the bondage of material consciousness. At that time, the living entity will automatically renounce the material sense objects and the material mind. So when you are in spiritual consciousness, when you are in bhakti, connected with Krishna in this fourth stage, then naturally you've given up. It's not that, oh, now I'm going to do this extra effort. No, it's just you're already somewhere else. And if I'm standing here, I'm automatically not standing over there. So it's not that I stand here, then I have to give up standing over there. No, if I'm standing here, I'm not standing over there. You're just somewhere else already. You have automatically renounced that state of mind. You're automatically in a different state of mind. It's not that then you have to do something else. That is it. By doing that connection, again, remember we're talking about identifying yourself. When you give up the false identification with matter, then you automatically identify with your true spiritual transcendental self and with Krishna, and then automatically it's a different identification. You're no longer playing the game of material intelligence. You're no longer trapped in the bondage of material intelligence. Very nice. Purport. Lord Krishna now specifically answers the questions the sages originally placed before Lord Brahma. Ultimately, the spirit soul has nothing to do with the material sense objects and the gunas, the modes of nature. But because of one's false identification with the material body, again, very important, because of the false identification with the material body and mind, the modes of nature, the gunas, are empowered to engage one in illusory occupations because of the identification. By destroying this false identification with matter, the soul gives up the illusory occupations awarded by the gunas, by the modes of nature. It is clearly stated in this verse that the living entity is not empowered to independently free himself from illusion, but must situate himself in Krishna consciousness, in full awareness of the Supreme Lord. Okay, very nice. Verse 29. The false ego, ahankar. Very important topic. This is the false identification, ahankar. That's what it is. The term is ahankar. Ahankar, the eye maker, is when you falsely identify your false, translated as false ego, in the sense of ego as an I, the Greek word for I, ego, the false I. It's a very important term, ahankar. The false ego of the living entity, the ahankar of the living entity, places him in bondage and awards him exactly the opposite of what he really desires. Therefore, an intelligent person should give up the constant anxiety to enjoy material life and remain situated in the Lord, who is beyond the functions of material consciousness, the fourth stage of consciousness, beyond the three we spoke about. So, very important, very simple, direct teachings from Uddhava-gita. So, ahankar, okay? Ahankar makes the soul bound. That's the classic yoga philosophy. This is everywhere. This is the base concept. It's the ahankar, your identification with the body, the false I. What's the false I? Me, I'm this body, born in this family, I'm this, gender and this inclination and this political party and this nationality, all these false identifications, and it creates this false concept. These things bind the soul to matter, bondage. So we're bound to matter, and then we're bound chasing after all these things which are actually useless and the opposite of what we want, because we want freedom, we want intelligence, we want to live, we want Satchitananda, we want knowledge, we want to live forever, Sat, we want knowledge, pure consciousness, Chit, and we want Ananda, bliss. But when we fall into the false ego, the ahankar program, we get the opposite of what we want. We die, so we don't live Sat, we live Asat, Chit. Our minds get covered by all the modes, so they vary from very ignorant to slightly ignorant, so we get covered, our Chit gets covered, and Ananda, we don't get Ananda. I mean, I don't know about you, but we're not living in bliss, right? Suffering, you identify your body, pains and anxiety and financial anxiety, physical anxiety, sickness, politics. it's just suffering all the time, right? So you get the opposite of what you want, the opposite of what he really desires. Therefore, an intelligent person gives up this constant anxiety to enjoy material life, this anxiety born of the rajas. Rajas, Krishna says, in rajas you have endless anxiety because you have so many desires, so many things you want. So all this wanting, desiring, this generates this constant state of anxiety. Most people are suffering from different levels of anxiety, from like a little bit to, to just crushing anxiety, right? Because there's so many things we want, so many things we think we need, and it just weighs down on our minds. So give up this constant anxiety to enjoy material life and remain situated in the Lord. Remain situated in the fourth stage of consciousness, where you do experience bliss. Remain in Shanti, in the peace of loving devotion to Krishna. Then you experience bliss. Because that is beyond the functions of material consciousness. Okay, purport. Srila Sridhar Swami comments as follow. And remember, Srila Sridhar Swami is the oldest commentary we have preserved of the Bhagavad Purana is from Sridhar Swami. So it's always like the original commentary on the Bhagavad Purana from about 800 years ago. He says as follows, how does material existence cause the bondage of the living entity, and how can such a bondage be given up? The Lord explains this here by the word ahankara kritam. Because of ahankar, false ego, one is bound up in the network of illusion. Artha viparyayam indicate that although the living entity desires blissful life, eternity, and knowledge, Satchitananda, he adopts procedures that actually cover his eternal blissful nature and give him exactly the opposite result. The living entity does not want death and suffering, but these are actually the results of material existence, which is therefore useless for all practical purposes. An intelligent person should contemplate the unhappiness of material life and thus become situated in the transcendental Lord. The word samsara chintam can be understood as follows. Samsara, or material existence, the samsara, the wheel of material existence, the ocean of birth and death, indicates material intelligence because material existence only occurs because of the living entity's false intellectual identification with the material world. Again, identification with matter. Because of this misidentification, one becomes overwhelmed with samsara chintam, anxiety to enjoy the material world. One should become situated in the Lord and give up such useless anxiety. Wonderful. So we'll end here. Wonderful teachings from the Lord Hamsa. Hope you're enjoying it, and we have more in next class, and have a rest of your day with lots of peace and lots of love. Hare Krishna.